It's House in Baltimore, and an end as I get on an airplane and fly out to the friendly heart of the Midwest for some football up there in Cheeseland this weekend at Lambeau Field. Backup quarterbacks, all that stuff. We got the Terps on the hardwood as well as the gridiron, and baseball off-season percolating. Now, you know, I don't get to the back of the rack here very often and go into my Wayback Machine about my days back in the old century as a syndicated sports radio host. This guy was one of my colleagues, one of my friends there. He did nights, I did days. Sometimes we passed and certainly passed around Papa Joe Chevalier. We welcome Kevin Wheeler back onto the program. He is in St. Louis, Missouri, as they say these days, at 101 ESPN. You can find him at Kevin Wheeler 94 on Twitter as well. What is going on, Wheels? How's life, man?
Everything's good, Nasty. How you doing, man? Everything hanging tight? Everything good?
Well, you know, we're getting into this offseason with baseball, and I think of you as a baseball guy. So, I mean, I literally am calling you to talk baseball and offseason and hot stove. But before I even get to any of that, dude, we had some good times at Sporting News Radio for it being what it was at that point. I mean, I don't have a lot of you guys on. I mean, Papa Joe, I can't have anymore. Jay Mariotti, I mean, who the hell would ever call him for any reason?
I should tell you my Mariotti story one of these days. We can have a laugh on that.
Oh, dude, you want to tell it now, or is it not something for is it not suitable for work?
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's a little bit extensive, but I can tell it.
If you want to, I'm wearing my Zeppelin shirt, right? So, and I'm drinking some water. So I've done a lot of radio today, but if you want this to be your stairway to heaven, I can save it for the encore.
No, it's fine, man. I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, our bosses sent me and a guy named Scott Fransky, who's now the Phillies play-by-play guy, and our producer, Tim Parker, to Sydney, Australia for the Olympics, for the 2000 Olympics.
Dude, I did not know that. I really got. What a cream job you got there, man. They tried to send me to the Pro Bowl in Hawaii, but it literally, no. I declined to go because it was after the Ravens Super Bowl. So, like, the whole way, I kept telling Jenscow, like, dude, I own the radio station in Baltimore. I need to be in Tampa. I need to be on the air. And they knew all of that going in. But I'm like, and he's like, well, hey, you want to go to the Pro Bowl? And I'm like, because it was my time slot, right? 5 hours later in the day, it would have made more sense to have me there because I was on. It would have been 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning in Hawaii, right? So I said, if the Ravens win, I need to go home for the parade. And the Ravens won, so I still haven't been to Hawaii, Wheeler. 17 years later, I've never been to Hawaii. It's true.
Oh, man. Well, you got to make a trip. I've never been there either myself, but I've never really had a good reason.
They sent you to Australia, you lucky mate.
They did, man.
Good on you.
Did. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I mean, we Scott and I did, updates, so we each took like 10-hour shifts, and you're sitting in the condo doing your updates, and when you're not on shift, you go around to various events, or you'd go hang out with the assembled American media, or you'd go mix with the Australians who were, honest to God, man, just happy that we were all there. They were amazing. They were friendly. They helped us out.
That's the greatest country on earth right there, and I don't say that often in the United States, but I mean, I go to Australia. I love Australia. I would go back in a minute. It's a long way, or as Jimmy Buff would say, a mighty long airplane ride, but I love Australia. So, I figured you would have been down at Bondi Beach doing your thing down there, Wheels. That's what I was figuring.
Yeah, we had a little fun, and the worst part about it, this is where the Mariotti thing comes in, is there's three of us staying in a two-bedroom condo, and we're originating our broadcast from this condo, which is right across the park from the Olympic Park. I mean, we're walking distance from the Olympic Park. So because of all the conveniences, Jay decides he doesn't like his hotel that at the time, the Chicago Sun-Times had him in. He decided to move in with us. First of all,
dude, you live with Mariotti in Australia?
No! It's even worse, dude.
No.
He would take off with our rental car because he thought it was too much trouble to go get his own, even though the newspaper would pay for it. He would eat our food, drink our beer, and not replace it. And all three of us, we had this deal. Hey, if you're stuck in the place and you've got no car, you can eat what you want, just replace it when you get back out. And that was kind of our thing. And we're noticing, like, stuff disappearing, and we're talking to each other about it, and like, crap, it's Mariotti. He's eating our Pringles. He's taking our leftovers, and he's using it for himself and not replacing anything. And it goes through like a month of this, of just Jay being Jay, and we're putting up with it. And we get near the end of it.
He's one of the most inconsiderate people I've ever met in any walk of life anywhere. I can't imagine living with him. You know what I mean? Like,
he's the worst. I mean, the worst. We'd have 4 towels in the place. He'd go through 2 of them every day. So there were 2 left for the 3 of us. We ended up going out and buying more towels, but I mean, this is like
I see sort of John Candy holding up like the underwear, like that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, there was no moment where it was like those aren't pillows, but there were a lot of those planes, trains, and automobiles kind of awkwardness. Except it kind of came to a boil at the end because we were all just like keeping it quiet. We're like, fine, Jay's a diva, he's a jerk, all that stuff. But we're just kind of like trying to do our thing. And I'm out. This is probably the last couple of days we're in Australia. We're out at this great place down in downtown Sydney. It's a cigar bar / hangout. A lot of athletes are there. A lot of media guys are there. And we're sitting there hanging with a bunch of media guys. And one of them was Dan Pompei. And I've talked about this with Dan on the air before. So
this is and Dan, whom I love and was our colleague and still comes on the show all the time here.
Great guy.
And who's one of the great people, right? I mean, just one of the reasons he gets Eric Weddle inside stories is he's a great guy. And if you had a story to tell, you'd want to tell Dan Pompei your story, right?
Yes. And he was there, so this is why. I mean, I've joked about it with him on the air. He remembered it well without me even bringing it up. But we're just doing our thing, right? It's laid back. I'm just kind of ignoring Mariotti and talking to the other guys that are there, and we're checking in. Now, you remember that Tommy Lasorda was coaching the U.S. baseball team then, right?
I do.
And it was kind of a big deal, right? Cuba had already advanced to the gold medal game. The United States was playing in the semifinal game to go to the gold medal game. And he said, hey, call back to the studio, see what the score is. And I did. And at the time, they were losing. And he was like, oh, good. If they lose, I don't have to go write about the gold medal game tomorrow. And I just looked at him in a total smart-ass way and said, geez, someone's selfish. Like, just being a smart-ass. And he lost it, Nestor. He lost it. He starts screaming at me in the middle of this place. You're just a little punk. You don't know how much trouble this is, and the deadlines are all jacked up. And I finally got it when he started to calm down. I said, yeah, I get it, Jay. All of your stuff is more important than 25 guys winning a gold medal for their country. Like, it's all about you. And then, of course, he starts losing it and screaming at me more. At that point, I threw the table aside. I went after him, and that's where Dan Pompei comes in, by the way.
Wow.
Dan and one other guy, and I forget who it was, but he was from the Indianapolis Star at the time, physically held me back from beating the living crap out of Jay. And then Jay backed off and left, and then I left, and it kind of de-escalated. And then we ran into each other back in our room, and I basically chased him out of the place.
This is an international incident in Australia.
Yeah, well, in the end,
maybe it's a good thing I didn't go to Australia then. I mean, I felt like, wow, you got to go. I didn't. I think they fired me. No. When was he? It was the summer.
2000, yeah.
But okay, so I made it. They fired me on Christmas Eve. Yeah, it was either Telluride, Aspen. I don't know. He called me from a ski chalet and fired me. And he said, and by the way, he said, we'll get together in a couple weeks. We'll bring you to Chicago and do this the right way. I saw him 4 years later at the Super Bowl, and I said, I'm still waiting for my deep dish pizza.
Yeah. It got even crazier after that when Paul Allen and the Sporting News came in. They ran almost all of us out at the same time, and it was about 2 weeks before Christmas when they let us all know that it was coming to an end. So that was pleasant.
Life in radio. Kevin Wheeler is my guest. We're exchanging stories. We're going to talk sports. I swear to God we are. You can find him at Kevin Wheeler 94. All of our programming here brought to you by our friends at Deli Ish on Wise Avenue in Dundalk. Get that New York-style deli, but get it in Dundalk. The Reubens, they're thick. The lean corned beef, it's the best in town. And legit sandwiches like the Curly Fryer. Tasty pickles, they'll cater in for you during the holidays. Or if you have a holiday party in your office, delibaltimore.com. Mention us out there, Deli-ish on Wise Avenue in Dundalk. Kevin Wheeler, my guest, Kevin Wheeler 94. He's ESPN 101. We were colleagues. Dude, I don't even have my Mariotti story is just one day he went after me in the studio because I said, "Hey Jay, how you doing?" And he went nuts. I mean, and it turned out that he was really pissed off that I had Kurt Schilling, Cal Ripken, and Tony Gwynn because I flew to San Diego and did a sit down with Gwynn because he liked me and allowed me that. I'm in Baltimore, so I did an hour with Cal. So I had done this stuff, and one point Schilling called in, and he thought that it should have been on his show, and he didn't realize that I had DJ'd Schilling's wedding, and Schilling's wife was my best friend growing up, and that's kind of how Kurt called in. But he was always the guy that had to. If Michael Jordan was doing the network that day, it had to be on his show, and yet he didn't put any effort into doing it, and then got pissed when Bill Parcells would call in and talk to Bruce Murray instead, right? Or whatever, right?
Oh, dude, I mean, I don't know if it was before or after you left. He got up and walked out in the middle of his show 3 times just because he had a hissy fit about something he didn't like that his producer was telling him. Middle of the show, walked out of the building and left. I mean, yes, that... And by the way,
the scene with me was more like a sitcom because I was literally coming in my happy usual to be in Chicago. I was always happy. Dude, did you ever see me miserable in Chicago?
No, you were always smiling. You were always high energy, man. You were always every time I saw you, it was high five, hello, how you doing?
Yeah, man. I mean, and I'll tell you, a half a lifetime later, some of my favorite people, I worked at the Baltimore Sun. I worked for an ensemble and a big newspaper, knew a lot of people, still keep friends, to this day, and had enemies like everyone else that ever worked anywhere 30 years later, especially a guy like me, But, more friends and enemies by a lot. And I would say the same thing, about my time at the Evening Sun and the News American. Deep, wonderful friendships. But my time in Chicago as being sort of a commuter guy that got in and out. By the way, you'll appreciate this. When I got fired, Papa Joe calls me. I'm going to do my best Papa for you now. Let me see if I can do this for you. Nestor, I just want to say, first of all, I think the world of you, pal, and I hate your raisins, but and look, we're gonna settle things up. I'm gonna get that steak for you. It burns, but Papa Joe was, one of the all-time great dudes ever, right? He really was.
Absolutely.
And just so many awesome people that were there that I keep in my life, Matt and Hagen and all these people. So, for me, it was one of the great times of my life, and Mariotti would be the only sort of weird experience. But if I were to categorize what happened that day, it would probably look like something from an NBC sitcom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I walked in, I went to sit in the seat that he was getting out of. He was getting out of the seat. I said something like, "Hey, dude, what's up? How you doing? Everything okay?" Because his wife had battled cancer, and I had been very magnanimous with him. I remember having a deep conversation with him, believe it or not, on the roof of the Hoosier Dome before Eddie George and the Tennessee Titans played a playoff game against the Indianapolis Colts and Peyton Manning that I flew in for there. So, I always got along with Jay. I read Jay. Everybody read Jay. People listened to Jay. A lot of people hated Jay. That's fine. But he went nuts on me, berserk, screaming at me and berating me about Baltimore and, every euphemism you could think about my Venezuelanness and my shortness and my fake writerness and my radio station only being an AM station. Anything, my finger, whatever the insults were that the same insults the President of the United States would make about me if he knew me, I guess, because it's more like third grade humor. But he went nuts on me in front of the producers and stuff, and he was really kind of pissed at the producers as I remember it. It had something to do with a guest that wound up on my show instead of his. Literally, I think that's what it was about. And he went nuts on me, and during the first break, I came out of the office, and keep in mind, you're dealing with a 29-year-old version of me, a little different version of me. No, I was 32, so I was 32, right? So I'm 49 now. I ran, and everybody in the building saw it, and they knew I had a hot mic in 30, 29, you know what I mean? I'm prepping to do a show, One-on-one sports, and here he is, the pride of Baltimore, Nasty Nestor Aparicio. Hey, welcome in, everybody, Nasty Nationwide. So I do my 13 minutes, the clock bends down, and they knew, when I walked out of there, it was going to be where is that MFer? I got 3.5 minutes, and he was gone. And Jen Scow's in the office with his feet up, and he's now calm down. Now calm down. You got to go back in. You got to do a shift. But I did not take to being treated in that fashion publicly.
No.
Because I never treated anybody else, never have treated anybody like that. So I can honestly say in a public forum, in a workplace, I've never been treated worse by anybody than Jay Mariotti. So, yes.
Yeah, I would say that you share that title with probably
thousands.
Several hundred other people.
Literally.
Yeah, pretty much everybody he's ever worked with. Yep.
Oh, beautiful memories. Kevin Wheeler, ESPN 101. All right, look, we got to talk sports, dude, because, I didn't bring you on additional Mariotti, but I would say of all of the Mariotti sort of faux bashing we did, because it's a lot worse at the time than it is now because, like, who cares, right? But the other part, and it is a sort of a comedic take, but I really do treasure those relationships. It was a great time in my life. I have Rick Ballou on all the time. I find Kemp once in a while. Nahagan and I text 2 weeks ago. I had Bernard McKinney on every time the Ravens beat the Browns or every time the Orioles lose to the Indians, which happens a lot, you know.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm still tight with those guys. Rick Ballou and I we were neighbors back in the day, man. We lived like 2 miles apart. We'd all hang out together in their backyard. Actually, in his garage and barbecue while we were watching football in the garage. It was awesome.
And that's back when the Patriots sucked and you didn't have to deal with them like that.
That's exactly right.
As long as you could avoid Florida State, you probably are. But you were Miami. He was Florida State.
I'm a Miami guy.
Well, let's start with this. Yeah. Miami college football, because that's your flavor. I don't talk a ton of college football. I'll tell you what, dude. I watched college football all day. It was bye weekend, right? So I had the weekend around. We have a baby cat who we love, and she's had a few little illnesses, and we keep an eye on her. So I'm like, I'm going to work. I'm doing sales, doing business, doing all the stuff I'm doing. We got CJ Mosley coming out to Costas on Tuesday. We're swabbing for the bone marrow. So we're doing all this stuff, and I watched football all day, and the games, the 3:30 games were like turds. And, man, the air came up on that Miami game, and the smoke came out, and the chain came out, and the convicts and the Jesuses and the Lou Holtz images, and things are going on. Boy, that was fun for a man of my age. I can't say that I get that passionate about an Alabama-Clemson game or whatever, It was a pretty good football game.
And it's funny because the best part about that not only is the history for guys that are our age, because I'm pretty close. I'm maybe 2-3 years younger than you. I'm about to turn 46.
But, dude, you were Orange Bowl, though. You went to the Orange Bowl like as a student. You played there, right?
Yeah, every game. And it was, like what makes this even better now, even for people that are not, like us that are our age, people that may not even remember the great stuff, it's still a culture clash. It's still old school Midwest football tradition and touchdown Jesus versus the turnover chain and the guys that like to run and talk and like to run their mouths. And I think that culture clash makes it even better for the football game.
Well, it certainly is something, I'll say that. But as far as a football team, as far as a national championship, the picture got a lot muddier, and certainly got muddier 2 weeks ago. We were in Nashville watching those games unfold before the Ravens played the Titans, and watching all those teams lose, including Maryland to Rutgers, which was disheartening. And Michigan certainly took care of Maryland over the weekend. But other than Alabama, I don't know what there is to talk about. But who is going to beat Alabama? And I hear the Oklahoma stuff, and certainly Miami's going to have their hands full here in the next coming weeks, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, man. This is different than the last couple of years. The last 2 years were completely a countdown to Clemson and Alabama. We all knew it halfway through the year. You knew who the best teams were, and you knew it's basically coming down to them. Right now, you can take a look, and when the playoff rankings are kind of broken down, I'll bet you can look at the top 8 teams and make an argument that team could win the national championship. It's that nuts because nobody has a quarterback. Alabama doesn't have a passing game. Miami's quarterback is questionable. Clemson's quarterback is questionable. Wisconsin doesn't throw the football. Auburn's is questionable. Georgia's is a true freshman. I mean, the only team that's got it going is Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield, and I think that chaos is going to make for some insanity over the next month.
Well, we're going to have some fun on Saturdays, but I know deep at heart you are a baseball guy, and we're a baseball player down there in Miami. Some thoughts about the offseason, man. I mean, you're out in the St. Louis market where baseball, I would think, dominates most of your conversation, right? I mean, literally with no Rams around anymore, you're doing a ton of hot stove right now, and you're a perfect guy to do that along with, the Bernie Miklases of the world, the Jeff Gordons, and all my old friends who I worked with 34 years ago now. My first staff was Bernie and Jeff Gordon and Bob Paston and those guys. But, my heart breaks for you guys, for all of Howard Balzer comes on all the time. We talk football around here. It sickens me that St. Louis and San Diego don't have football. But I'm in a city here where we lost a team, and you're now in a city, and I know you're not native, but, they've now done it twice. These have got to be the hard times, when there's no football. And it's got to be even harder seeing the Los Angeles Rams do well all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I mean, we still talk about them. It used to be more like the ugly breakup. Last year, it was all about hate watching them and rooting for him to lose. And people are all still rooting for him to lose because nobody can stand Stan Kroenke. I mean, this was entirely about him boosting his personal wealth. This had nothing to do with, as you know, I mean, you guys, you're a fan in a town that lost the team. It's not about fan support. It's not about attendance. It's none of that. It is entirely about boosting the net worth of the guy that owns the team. And I think everybody still roots for him, but we have to kind of grudgingly kind of acknowledge they're actually pretty good this year. I mean, Sean McVay's got no history with any of us. We were all big on ripping on Fisher, not because he was terrible coach, but he flat out lied to all of our faces for years about everything, from players to coaching moves to whether or not he was involved in the talks about moving to LA. I mean, just a bad guy, even though he's got a reputation for being a good guy. He's not one of the good guys. So we would root against that. This year, I got to admit, nasty, it's a little bit less nasty. It's a little bit more kind of like, all right, we're a few years removed. We touch on this here and there in segments, but we certainly don't focus much on it.
Yeah, they're not coming back. I mean, and I guess anybody who's an old codger who's angry to begin with at the world has now seen it leave twice. I don't think they even think enough to pick up the phone and bitch about it. It's more like what we did around here after the first year or two or three. And there are plenty of people here that still hate the Colts. We had to root for the Colts against the Steelers over the weekend, and I'm making jokes on the internet about it. And I have an incredible relationship with Chuck Pagano, who was the first person we called when my wife got cancer the first time because she had leukemia and he had leukemia. So, I get along with Jimmy Irsay when I see him and all that stuff. But, I know that vibe. I know that feeling. But it really does sort of, all right, well, we got a baseball team here. We got the Billikens. We got this. We got indoor soccer. We got, whatever we got. Let's circle the wagons. But in your town, it's, the Cardinals can carry the day there, but they need to be winning championships and not getting beaten by the Cubs, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, they carried the town even when the Rams were here, let's be honest.
Sure.
I mean, short of the greatest show on turf, that 3-year window where the Rams were amazing, short of that, I mean, the Cardinals have always dominated the conversation. And the fun thing now, Nancy, a bunch of us have been texting amongst each other the last few days, and Bernie and I have been talking about it. In studio, he and I have back-to-back shows. He goes the morning, I do the mid-morning. And the Cardinals are at the middle of everything. I mean, if you look at like MLBTradeRumors.com, you follow The Athletic, or you get on Twitter, they're being mentioned for Arrieta, they're being mentioned for Stanton, they're being mentioned for Donaldson. They're basically in the middle of everything, and you hit on it. It's because of the Cubs. That's changed the dynamic completely. They no longer have a division where your primary competitors are smaller market teams like the Reds and the Brewers and the Pirates that aren't going to be able to maintain it. Your primary competitor is the Cubs. I mean, they've been a sleeping giant for 20 years. They've got massive, massive revenue streams. They now have a front office that knows what they're doing, and that's what the Cardinals have to deal with now, so they're going to have to play big this winter.
Dealing with Eddie Vedder. Man.
Yeah.
Kevin Wheeler joining us here. He is Kevin Wheeler 94 out on Twitter. He does all things sports out in St. Louis. He is my colleague and friend from Sporting News Radio 101 Sports from what feels like a lifetime ago. He's doing the days there in St. Louis. You can find him, Kevin Wheeler 94. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by Coppin State University. They are our partners. We're doing the Lady Eagles and the Men's Eagles basketball games, home games this winter on WNST and AM 1570, as well as at CoppinStateSports.com. And, of course, Juan Dixon joining us here weekly to talk all things hoops. Shout out to our friends at Al's Seafood in Essex. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes there since the 1970s. I eat a lot of crabs. The oldest crab house in Baltimore is still there at Stemmer's Run in Eastern at the foot of 702. Go see Chad the Crab Man. That's my dude there at Al's Seafood. Give a shout out to Big Al as well, who was also a bone marrow transplant survivor, and an amazing, amazing story. Al's Seafood down in Essex. Kevin Wheeler, my guest. Kevin Wheeler 94 out in St. Louis. Some thoughts about the Orioles from a million miles away, dude. Like, I can't imagine if the Cardinals, let's just say, right, they're going into the last year with a Machado, Adam Jones, Zach Britton, Brad Brock. Oh, and by the way, Duquette, who tried to get out of here 3 years ago and wasn't allowed to go to Toronto in the middle of the night, and Buck Showalter both have their contracts tied to the end of next year. Oh, by the way, you got this kid Scope, who probably needs a contract right around like now if you really if you want to sign him. And then you've got the albatross of the Chris Davis thing way hanging over your head. The notion that Trumbo is still sort of hanging over your head. And let's not forget, They've got no pitching, dude, and but they made a lot of money. The old man is entangled in this $250 million. That's $250 million with Masson now that he sort of kind of owes them to some degree. That's been on his side of the fence for 12 years running now, and they're all tangled up in court. But deep down, I think he realizes or knows at some point he or his heirs may have to stroke a very, very, very large check, to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars to the Nationals. So this is really, really sticky around here, dude. When DeWitt got squeezed out of the deal here, that's chapter 1 of the Peter Principles, Kev. You got the better end of that deal there as far as the ownership because, I think
circuits are busy. Please try
the Cardinals do work some level of sort of relative transparency that they have to go win and they have to compete and their fans expect that, right?
Vision contract with Fox Sports Midwest. Not only do they demand